With this grand opening นะครับ let us start on the technical sessions for the Asia Conference Day of 2022 นะครับ Our first session will focus on the transformation to a decarbonized transport sector in Asia, presented by the Council of Decarbonisation of Transport in Asia นะครับ Allow me to welcome our moderators for this session, Ms. Uda Eichhorst, the project lead of the NDC Transport Initiative for Asia. Welcome, Ms. Kun Uda.
Thank you, Pan, very much for the kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure for me to be moderating this first technical session today of the Asia Conference Day of Transport and Climate Change Week 2022. In our session, we would like to discuss how we can move from climate goals to sustainable zero-carbon transport policy. What does it mean to become zero-carbon transport, and what are countries already doing to achieve that goal? So in our session, we'll have two parts. In the first part, I will talk with Alok Jain, CEO and Managing Director of Tran Consult Hong Kong. And Alok Jain has already participated in some of our sessions on Monday as well. So if you have tuned in on Monday already, you might already have met Alok. Alok is also a member of the Council for Decarbonising Transport in Asia. And we're very happy to welcome you again to this session, Alok. Welcome to this session. But before we come to your part, I would like to say that in the second part of the session, we will discuss with government officials from Vietnam, Thailand, and India how their institutions are planning to achieve the new climate targets that were set by the prime ministers at COP26 in Glasgow. What are they already doing, and what has happened since December last year? We would also like to include you, the virtual audience of this conference. So please use the live chat on the PLAS platform to share your thoughts and share your questions also with our panelists. I believe there's a first question in there already for you to discuss regarding your own vision for a decarbonized transport system. But with that, I would like to turn to you, Alok, and thank you for being with us here today. Just recently in April, the Council for Decarbonising Transport in Asia launched its flagship publication, The Path to Zero. And now we would like to hear from you. What's the vision of the Council for a Decarbonised Transport System in Asia by mid-century, and what makes it unique?
Thanks, Uda. First of all, this event actually comes at a very opportune time when there is already a big visibility and a lot of conversation about energy and transport all across the world, especially right after the release of the IPCC report. Now, coming back to Asia, Asia is home to almost 60% of the world population, and a big chunk of them are still aspiring to be urbanized and striving to access a better quality of life. So there's a big transformation that is happening all across Asia. Asia is responsible for almost 1/3 of global transport emissions, which has in last 20 years has grown by almost 2.5 times. So there's a huge growth in carbon emissions in Asia. So if there are no interventions done, this is expected to grow even further, and it will derail any hope of achieving global emissions for a better planet. So in this context, the Council actually came together with the help of GIZ and a number of other multilateral agencies. The Council's vision for 2050 is also set out in this context. The fundamental mobility needs of all the citizens must be met in an equitable and just manner, but with well-integrated zero-carbon options that are efficient and convenient. So it sounds very grand and very common, very generalized, but the report itself goes into very Asian-specific context and gives a lot of details. The good news on the Asian side is that the traditional Asian cities with their high density and mobility habits, which were mostly walk and bicycle-based, these are already globally recognized ways of creating low-carbon cities. So all we have to do is go back to these old ways and scale these things, these habits up. So that's at the citizen level, a lot can be done right there. Asia is already pulling its punch above its weight in the areas of, let's say, many of the transport decarbonization efforts like electrification. So today, 98% of electric buses in the world are actually in China. If you look at high-speed rail network, close to 80% of the global network of high-speed rail is actually in Asia. So we need to build on this strength with multi-stakeholder engagement while achieving social justice, economic justice, racial justice, gender justice. So all those social issues, where Asia has been a bit of a laggard, we probably have to catch up, keep those in mind as a baseline, and build upon those.
Thank you, Alok. You've mentioned justice as one of the fundamental aspects that are mentioned as part of the vision of the Council. And if I'm correct, the Council calls this also a blind spot when in the current debate about decarbonizing the transport sector. So could you explain in a little bit more detail what the Council means when we say blind spots and give a few examples?
Well, blind spots are fundamentally those sectors of mobility framework that are actually getting less attention. They are right in front of us, but not getting enough attention. But these are fundamental to achieving the zero carbon objective. So we are looking at some of the things which are bigger impact, bigger picture, but we are missing out on a number of these things. And these are what we call blind spots. So in the report, we actually identify 6 key blind spots, and I would just list out a few. So we got freight. Freight is really one area which is getting very little attention at this moment for 2 reasons. One is because of the complexity and lack of technological solutions available at the moment, and 2 is because there is so much focus on passenger transport that it is getting a little ignored. Some Asian countries are addressing this, but most of them have not extended the focus to the decarbonization of freight. The second one is the lack of integrated planning, which means a lot of patchwork approach to policy making, patchwork approach to solutions that are being provided in the cities, or regions. So that needs to be sorted out. There is too much focus on the new infrastructure. Billions are being poured into creating shiny infrastructure, which we call, shiny toys, basically. While the simple things are basic bus systems, basic pedestrian networks, bicycle lanes, which are very low cost interventions, and they can be done very easily and very quickly, and can be much more impactful. And these are getting a bit sidelined. So we want to bring that attention to one of these blind spots, that there are a lot of simple solutions which can create very high impact in the region. Then you have inconsistent economic policies and price signals, which make the investors quite wary about the pathways that are being taken and the returns that they can derive from many of these investments into green infrastructure. So the policy making is not cast in stone in many of these aspects, and that needs to be addressed. There is a lot of focus on technical solutions. Everybody is talking about smart city. It's the new buzzword, so people installing a lot of sensors, a lot of equipment, a lot of those. But then it is also clouding the diversity of mobility options. So technology is being seen as the solution, not as a tool to the solution. So I think that needs to be addressed. And of course, there is a continuation of a lot of ongoing bad habits, which can be easily fixed. The many solutions that already exist to address those things. We just have to move and make that shift to a transition towards better solutions. That's all. So we also recognize one fact that many of these blind spots that we talk about, they are sweeping generalizations. Asia is too diverse to paint in the same color, and hence any solution or package of solutions at the country level would need to be fine-tuned to local, cultural, political, and economic conditions. Some of these blind spots are easy to address, such as taking the integrated planning approach. And it's very easy to incorporate today. Or let's say by leapfrogging beyond car-centric cities, we can actually design a lot of new cities which are zero carbon cities. Asia is already undergoing massive urbanization. So there's a huge opportunity to create these zero carbon cities taking a greenfield approach. You know, so transport and mobility can be really an integral part of these zero carbon cities. And then if we really take that kind of an approach, not only we would create some good examples to follow, but we will also make a significant progress towards achieving the ultimate target.
Thank you, Alok. I think you've touched on a really large, many points that are important already. Freight as an overseen area, a little bit receiving not enough attention, but also the point you mentioned towards the end about stopping some of the harmful activities that we are continuing. So it's not enough to add new things to a running system, but also take out a couple of things like some remaining fuel subsidies, for instance, but also the allocation of road space, for instance, to cars instead of other more sustainable modes. So thank you very much. You've also addressed already quite a few things that need to be done. So the report also talks about enablers for change. And just in the interest of time, if you could pick one maybe additional aspect that you would like to mention for governments to act. And thank you also for pointing out the diversity in Asia. So that's something that we look into in the panel discussion. So maybe a last short comment from your side regarding how can we enable that transformation. Thank you.
One of the key enablers is access to finance, in my opinion. It's a big one of the biggest challenges in this piece of the puzzle. Many of the countries are looking for access to good finance or green finance, which can help them make a transition. The irony today is that it is easier for a $3 billion company to raise $5 billion than for a $1 million company to raise $500,000. And you know, in Asia, where 60% of the city travel is actually made of informal transport. And these are very small operators. And even for the freight, most of the operators are driver-owned vehicles or they have very small fleets of operation. This is a really big challenge. They can't really go to the market and raise debt and raise bonds and things like that. So they need easy access to finance. Yes, many development banks and agencies are stepping in to plug the gap. This council's work itself is supported by a multilateral effort, which is led by GIZ. But, you know, much more needs to be done. Asia is 60% of the world population, but it is not really getting its fair share of attention when it comes to the financial markets. And that is essential to achieve the zero carbon goals by 2050. I mean, the good news as we stand today is that 2050 goal for decarbonization of transport in Asia is still possible, even if it may look implausible due to current trajectory of things that are happening in various countries. But yeah, time is running out fast. We have to recognize that fact. The window of opportunity is closing. So there is no time to lose, really. We can't afford to lose any time. We must act now. That's the only thing I would say in the end.
Thank you, Alok, and thank you for this call for action at the end and putting the focus on finance for sustainable transport. So I'd like to give a virtual round of applause for Alok Jain. Thank you for being with us here this morning again. And now I would like to turn to our three panelists representing government agencies from Vietnam, Thailand, and India. And my first speaker, it's a great honor for me to welcome Ms. Hui, Principal Officer at the Department of Science, Education, and Natural Resources and Environment of the Ministry of Planning and Investment. And Ms. Hui is a technical focal point for the formulation of Vietnam's National Green Growth Strategy and also for the Climate Finance Task Force. And she'll be joining us on the stage in a minute. In the meantime, I'd like to Ms. Hui, welcome to the stage. In the meantime, let me introduce our online panelists. So we have Ms. Chutinthorn, Chief of Sustainable Transport Promotion Group at the Office of Transport and Traffic Policy and Planning in Thailand's Ministry of Transport. Kun Chutinthorn, welcome to this panel. You have over 20 years of experience working in OTP and are currently responsible for environmental issues both at national and international level. So we're very honored to have you with us here this morning. And last but by no means least, we would like to welcome Mr. Sudhendu Sinha from Niti Aayog, where you are an advisor in the Infrastructure, Connectivity and Electric Mobility vertical in India's government think tank. Mr. Sinha, your contributions in operations, infrastructure planning, coordination and management at field and policy-making levels were recognized and awarded multiple times at national and at ministry level. So we are very honored to have you as a panelist with us today as well. So in this panel, we would like to discuss which steps are necessary to achieve decarbonization of transport by mid-century. So ladies and gentlemen, in the online chat, please post your questions to the panelists into the chat as we go along so that we can pick some of them during the Q&A of the panel discussion. At COP26, the prime ministers of Vietnam, Thailand, and India announced new climate targets and more ambitious climate goals for Vietnam to become net zero in 2050, for Thailand 2065, and for India in 2070. So we would like to hear about what has happened since. You don't have a mic. Do you have? So, Ms. Hue, thank you very much for being with us in the studio. And you have over 15 years of experience in policy development and sustainability and green growth. So you also were part of the Vietnamese delegation to Glasgow COP26. Could you please tell us, your ministry also published the Green Growth Strategy of Vietnam last year in October already, making reference to a long-term goal, which has now been set to 2050. So could you kindly share with us, how are you implementing the strategy and what will it take us to a net zero goal?
Thank you. Thank you for Kai's introduction. And for your question, let's begin for my answer. As you may know, that on the 1st of October in the year 2021, the Prime Minister is the issue the National Strategy on Green Growth for the periods of 2021 to 2030 with a vision to the 2050. The strategy was issued just before the COP26 conference in Glasgow, and it's showing that Vietnam's willingness to realize its commitment on climate change and the importance of the strategy in implementing the net zero commitment were also emphasized by our Prime Minister Minh at the meeting with the presidents of the COP26 last month. So it can be seen that the key points of the strategy is the harmonizing between the green growth objectives and socio-economic development objectives towards the sustainable development, contributing to the economic restructuring associated with the innovating the models of the economy. This is also clearly demonstrated through the four objectives of the strategy. The first one is the reducing the intensities of greenhouse gas emission per GDP, and the second one is the greening economy sectors, and the third one is the greening lifestyle and promoting sustainable consumption, and the fourth one, the new objectives is the greening the transition on the principles of equalities, inclusion, and enhancing the resilience of the economy. The strategy also set out the cross-cutting solution and also solution for the prioritized sector, including transportation, based on the core green growth scenarios. For the transportation sector, I would like to mention here that the strategy is identified two specific objectives two objectives, including the rate of public transport, and also the second one is the rate of buses using clean energy. To the year 2030, the former set out for the special cities is 25%, and the latter is at least the 15% compared to the total of bus fleet. And for the city type 1, the number is 5% and 10% compared to the total of bus fleet. To the year 2050, the former is special cities is the 40%. And for the city type 1, the numbers is the 15s and 40s compared to total of bus fleets. And of course, for the net zero commitment by the 2050s in the COP26, yes, we update. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this overview. And it's great to hear that the green growth strategy is having this fourth objective that you mentioned, or fourth pillar of inclusion and equality, and really trying to bring together economic development with the zero carbon development. And I think this will be key, as Alok also pointed out, to have this in mind in a just transition. So thank you very much. I'm sure there'll be many questions, but we'll first go to the next speaker before we go to the Q&A. So Kun Chutinthorn, Thailand increased its ambition as well at COP26. Could you share more about your approach in the transport sector to implement the COP26 announcements and also for decarbonizing the transport sector overall?
Thank you very much. Yes, hello. Thailand is also become one of the countries that approached the new version of nationally determined contribution, which include the strategy management plan at both the national and the local level. The Prime Minister of Thailand, as you know, that attended COP26 in Glasgow. And on this occasion, the Prime Minister emphasized that Thailand had put climate action as the top priority and presented Thailand's active efforts, including various frameworks and policy that the government has been implementing, and also announced Thailand's aim to reach carbon neutrality by 2050 and the net zero greenhouse gas emission by or before 2065 to urgently tackle the issue. The Prime Minister also announced that Thailand's aim to reach carbon neutrality by 2050. Yes, and as a result, this year, the country will announce the revised Thailand's long-term greenhouse gas emission development strategy, with each one of the main ambitious strategy towards Thailand's goal to achieve net zero carbon emission by 2065, and to update the NDC target by next 2 years. For the transport sector, as well as another key sector, we plan to update the sectoral NDC target as soon as possible. As for now, for transport sectoral NDC, Thailand is keeping up its development of public transport and is aiming to reduce 31 million tons of greenhouse gas emission to achieve the target of transport NDC target in 2030. Before, with the support through technology transfer.
Thank you very much, Kun Chutinthorn. And it's really interesting to hear also your timeline and for updating the NDC. As we all understand, there is sort of a follow-up, of course, on the whole process of the new announced targets. And also, you mentioned technology transfer and international cooperation, so that's something that we want to get back to as well towards the end of our discussion. But before that, let me turn to Mr. Sinha. India announced their target, new target as well as at COP26. At the same time, India also signed up to the Glasgow Declaration on accelerating the transition to 100% zero-emission vehicles by 2040, pointing out, and I think this was very interesting, that this should also focus on 2- and 3-wheelers and not just talk about cars, because they, of course, play a very important role here in the Asian context. So could you share with us how are the new climate commitments affecting your work, and where do you currently see the greatest challenge to achieve the climate targets in India for the transport sector?
Thank you, Uda. With the specific commitment that India has made to the International Committee of Nations, we are ensuring that all the policy initiatives of the government, they are synchronized and aligned towards achieving the goal of sustainability, achieving sustainability through decarbonized transport. Now, these commitments that we have made, we have affirmed at a global platform that our policies and investments would be in favor of decarbonization of India's transport sector, with thrust on, of course, electric mobility, that is the sunrise area. Now, a number of flagship schemes have been initiated by the government, almost equaling some 7.4 billion US dollar for a period of 5 years. We have taken measures like increasing incentives for reducing the upfront cost of two-wheelers. You rightly mentioned the two-wheelers and three-wheelers, they are almost 77-78% of fleet strength. Now, the result is phenomenal. This has brought about some 5 to 6 times more adoption than it was on the last year. For the three-wheelers, the aggregation model, where we aggregated the demand, and as a result, we have decided to have some 300,000 three-wheelers. The demand should be aggregated, the orders should be placed to the OEMs, and that is how the traction should be brought for the adoption of three-wheelers. For the buses, yes, on the OPEX model, Lighthouse City approach, where we identified to focus only on 9 principal cities first, where the population is 4 million plus, and these 9 cities can act as a lighthouse for all others. It can act as a source of inspiration for others. The result is phenomenal. Very recently, we have wrapped up a tender for 5,450 buses to be positioned across 5 cities of the country. And now we are moving on to the second tranche of these buses. In the first 5,450 buses, the prices on OPEX model that has been discovered is almost coming close to the diesel-driven buses. That is to say that when we move on scale and size, and we are ready to leapfrog technology, probably price does not become a constraint. Now, a lot of other schemes are there. States, we are driving it with our states, our constituent units. Almost 26 of the states, they have come up with very, very aspirational state EV policies, where they want to have clarity on electric mobility, new sustainable mobility that could attract the investors, that could clean the transport systems, that could bring prosperity to the state through increased employment opportunity. The National Awareness Campaign, Go Electric, as well as the e-Amrit web portal that was launched at COP26 are other signal initiatives of the government. Our firm belief is that these initiatives will enable India to leapfrog from traditional fossil fuel-based automobile transportation systems to environmentally cleaner, sustainable, advanced, and more efficient EV-based system. Now, regarding challenges, if I might say, decarbonizing India's transport is impossible without accelerated technology R&D support, because that would also bring about better quality on one hand, and it will also, added with the scale and the size, will bring about affordability to these vehicles. And finally, availability of capital to finance. It was mentioned earlier also that India's green transformation is a challenge. We want a mature green finance sector with innovative business models that would be critical for achieving our net zero transport. Finally, let me tell you through electric mobility and battery storage sunrise sector that India has an opportunity to take bold action to enable economic prosperity and avert the worst impacts of a changing climate. Supported by the right economic framework, these actions are going to put India on a path to realizing strong, equitable, and shared growth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sinha, for this comprehensive overview and very impressive numbers, including the amount of finance that India has already invested in the transformation of its mobility sector towards electric mobility and the lighthouse approach. Also, you mentioned how at the level of the regions, basically there is a vertical triggering down of these EV policies as well. So I think there's many important aspects that would be interesting to discuss for much longer, including the green finance, I think, is coming out as a topic in each of the speakers' inputs. So there are a few questions, I think, that we've already collected from the chat that I would like to turn to. And unfortunately, we do not have too much time, so I'd like to ask the speakers to keep it relatively short in their answers. And as we all know, in climate change, time is always of the essence, so same is for us here in this discussion. So there is a question to you, Ms. Hui. Yeah. If you could tell us a little bit more about what are the tasks in the transport sector in a little more detail of Vietnam's green growth strategy.
Yeah. Actually, as I mentioned before, that we updated the COP26 commitment in our strategy. Especially, we update in the Green Growth Action Plan in the periods of 2021 and to 2030, and take into account the cumulative impact on technical possible solution and emphasize the prioritized group of solution and tasks that are feasible, capacity ready, low regret, core benefits, and potentially pervasive, and accelerate the implementation of commitment instead of just taking into account the cumulative impact of economically viable solution. So for the transportation, actually we accelerating the green transition to achieve net zero can increase the inequalities and negative impacts of vulnerable groups, and also from business to a citizen to access the public transport, and also the user energies to all people. But accordingly, the strategy focus on the creating an environmental building mechanism to ensure the fairness and no one left behind through the provide certain loan and also financial support, while increasing the investment and support business and also startup in the fields of transition to low carbon technology, and creating the condition for the access the clean, affordable, and safe energy, and also it's expected to have a possible impact on the macroeconomic indicator, for example, like the GDP, employment, investment, budget, revenue, and for the Green Growth Action Plan, we have the 6 key tasks on transportation. First one we have to mention here is the review and revise relevant regulation, guidelines, and standard norm in order to reduce carbon emission in transport. And the second one we have to mention here is develop and implement fuels quality management solution, finalize the emission standards system. And the third one is promote digital transformation in transport activities and improve institution, policy, strategy, and planning for development of green transport infrastructure, and also promotes energy transition in transport sector and development of production industry and environmentally friendly energy vehicle, including the walking and cycling, as a question mentioned here. And the last one for the 6 key tasks is the improve the transport infrastructure system and enhance the connectivities and promote the multimodal transport development, and also promote the logistic activities and in the green direction. And also I would like to mention here is not only for the task on the transportation, we also mentioned about the 3 key tasks on the mobilizing financial resources. It's very important to realize the tasks of this sector. For example, like here, we improve the we improve the investment mechanism and policy, and also we establish policy and investment to mobilize the financial resources for green growth, and also for the transport sector is of course. And the last one is the enhance the access to green finance and green credits. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is indeed a transformational agenda and a lot to be done by the transport sector. So I think we next we'll set up another discussion on the finance in one of our future events. But first, I'd also like to turn to Ms. Chutinthorn, because you mentioned as well the energy plan in your presentation, and we were wondering a little bit here in the audience. This brings us to sector coupling, and also Ms. Hui mentioned, and of course we need to also clean the energy system for transport. So where do you see potential for closer collaboration between the transport and energy sectors, in particular when we talk about electric mobility and charging infrastructure? What are your experiences in Thailand to bring those sectors together?
Thank you very much. Yes, I would like to just talk about the country target to reduce greenhouse gas emission. As Thailand said that Thailand will reduce 20% of greenhouse gas emission by 2030, right? And transport sector is take into account about 30% from that target. So the activities under the transport sector much related to the energy sector, especially in the electrification, electric vehicles, both for the public and private electric vehicle. So in Thailand, we have just the long push for energy transition from fossil fuel to clean energy, and recently has planned the priority to develop roadmap to mobility. Therefore, since February this year, the government, Thailand's cabinet has approved a package of intensive, including tax cuts and subsidies to promote the shift to electric vehicles. That is for the private vehicles, right? And the cabinet approved to cutting the tax, like the purchase subsidies, the excise tax cut, and the reduced import duty. But for another side, for the public transport, the Ministry of Transport also trying to promote and change for the ICE buses to the EV buses, especially the buses under the responsibility of the Bangkok Mass Transit Authority, that under the Ministry of Transport. So we plan to change the 20,500 ICE buses to EV buses. in the next futures. And for the charging station, we very close cooperation with the Ministry of Energy to set up the charging station, both for the private vehicle and for the public transport. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chutinthorn. Now let me also take this a similar question to Mr. Sinha, because we've heard about your large bus tender. I think this was really impressive, and 5,450 buses. At the same time, of course, this will also put an additional burden on the electricity grid. And so maybe you could also let us know a little bit more about how do you see that in India, and what are you already considering in order to also help sort of the electricity grid in India become ready for the large rollout of electric mobility.
The distribution companies, they have been brought on board. So like this program is being driven by not only by one agency, but of course DISCOMs are a part of it. And the idea of charging infrastructure, setting up charging infrastructure with respect to these buses are primarily on the end terminals. The most interesting part is that every support, be it the buses, be it the charging infrastructure, be it the running as well as the cleaning part of it, everything is being provided by the OEMs with a cost, of course, on the OPEX model, where the upfront cost is no more a challenge. So what they are asking is an amount per kilometer. Mm-hmm. We have harmonized the specifications, and that is how the best of the OEMs, call it Volvo, call it Ashok Leyland, call it Tatas, all of them participated, and finally it has been won by one of them, and they are going to position it. With respect to the charging infrastructure, this is their responsibility. They are laying it down in consonance with and going in tandem with that of the distribution companies, and they are also augmenting their capacity to ensure that there are no grid challenges or there are no load deficiencies that comes in the way of it. So this is going to be a major game changer for the country, and this has inspired us to go for the second tranche of a still bigger number. Mm-hmm. And this time the number is that of 50,000 buses in one go. That is what we are trying to take it forward. And of course, it is no more confined to the first tier cities alone. We are moving on to the tier 2 and smaller cities, so that the public transportation network could be cleaned in first go, and that serves as an inspiration for all of us.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha. Truly impressive. And of course, we'll have even more time to discuss the important topic of electric mobility in our electric mobility session later on during the day. And as we're always coming back to it, we can really see how Asia is already in the forefront of electric mobility development. I mean, really, the large majority of buses, 2- and 3-wheelers are running in Asia by far. It's only the car market that is in other regions. So I think that's a good starting point, really, for Asia to develop more sustainably. Unfortunately, we already have to move to our last question, and I'd like to ask all the speakers for a very succinct answer in just like 2 minutes. But of course, we are here as an international cooperation conference, and also try to foster this regional exchange. So my question to you is, as well as to the audience, you can find a poll in the live chat as well on the same question. So in which area do you see the greatest potential for regional or international cooperation to accelerate the transport decarbonization even more? Yeah, Ms. Hui, please.
Yeah. Actually, for decarbonization in the urban transport and also contribute to the net zero commitment, I think it's the own information I also mentioned before, but I would like to mention more here is that is for Vietnam, we focus on develop the smart cities. In smart cities, it's own the incentives and it owns the solution in terms of policies and also regulation and norm we apply here, and maybe for next month, maybe MPI will work with some donors to pilot in smart city in some provinces and select based on some criteria that is met to the environmentally friendly transport vehicle in the city, in big cities, and also in the city that is willing to work the green transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think interesting also, since Alok in his talk in the beginning also mentioned the possibility of zero carbon cities and smart cities, bringing these aspects together for more exchange both within Vietnam as well as in the region and collaboration with development partners. So thank you very much for this. Next, I would like to turn to Kun Chutinthorn. What is your view? Where do you see most potential for regional collaboration?
Thank you very much. I think Thailand may have the same problem as other developing countries, and we are in the transition period. So to change and to decarbonize transportation, the electric vehicle is the main part that we would like to develop, and we would like to cope with that transition for both in energy and transport sector. And more than beyond the electric vehicle, I think to develop the mass rapid transit, not only in the Bangkok area, but to another major city over the country, is also one of the main activity that the Ministry of Transport would like to develop for that one. And one more thing is to cooperate with the international agency. I think the technical transfer and also to access to the clean finance is also one of the main major part of the development for the sustainable transport in Thailand. And as we all know that to tackle the target of the decarbonization is not the easy pathway, and we have not the shortcut solution. And transport is not just to travel around, but transport sector is the one of the main backbone development of the country, right? So we just like the Ministry of Transport in Thailand, we not only to go toward for the decarbonization, but we also have the responsibility to develop the infrastructure for the country as well. So we need to work together in both two sides, both the decarbonize and both the sustainability and also the development of the country as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kun Chutinthorn. And now, Mr. Sinha, from your point of view, where do you see the greatest potential for regional or international collaboration, apart from what you've already mentioned? And of course, we can also, I think, learn much from the dedication in India, in other regions as well.
Right. So a lot of international as well as regional collaboration, cooperation, specifically in three areas. One is sharing of best practices, second is technology, and third is capital availability. Now, this would bring about cross-pollination openness, it would bring about. It will also bring about cross-pollination of ideas and give opportunities to explore those solutions to those problems which are kind of roadblock to our decarbonization targets.
Thank you very much for this concise answer. And this is indeed what we want to do in the continuation of today's conference day, in exchanging good practices and ideas, as you said, cross-fertilization, and also looking into these different aspects, what we can learn. And I hope that we'll have more in-depth discussion throughout the day. So thank you very much to all my speakers in the session. We highly appreciate the time you took to be with us here today. Thank you also for the audience for your active participation and listening in. So what we can see it was mentioned, just to summarize, good practices, technology, and of course, capital availability, access to finance, and the experiences to really roll out electric mobility on the one hand, but really also ensure the affordability and accessibility of public transport and transport overall to all citizens, and bringing this together in the economic development. So thank you all very much for your contributions. And with this, I would like to close this session, and we are giving back, would like to give back the moderation for the Asia Conference Day to our main moderator, Pan Piyasil, here in the studio. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists.
Thank you.